We are glad that you joined us on this Sunday morning at the 8:30 service, so thank you for being here this morning. You know, today is one of the most watched sporting events in history, the Super Bowl, and this is the 57th Super Bowl in history. The first Super Bowl was played on January 15th, 1967. I would have been 2 years old, almost 3. Some of you weren't even born yet for that first one. A few of you may actually remember it being played. The NFL champions, the Green Bay Packers, defeated the AFL champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, a score of 35-10. The game was played at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. The Packers were favored to win the game by 14 points. That first Super Bowl was simulcast by 2 networks. NBC had the rights to nationally televise the AFL games, and CBS had the rights to televise the NFL games. So both of those networks were allowed to televise the game simultaneously. And if you would have attended the Super Bowl in 1967, tickets ranged in price, are you ready? From $6 to $12. Now here's something that's interesting. Editorials were written all around the country about the exorbitant ticket price of $12. That would be equivalent today with inflation of $105 today. I understand that tickets for tonight's game in Phoenix on the low end are $3,800. If you want a seat at the 50-yard line, the average ticket price is $4,500. I know several of you are going to jump on a plane right after church and go do that. That $12 price, by the way, in 1967 was thought so high that there were actually riots held in the cities of Santa Barbara, Bakersfield, and San Diego because people thought that was too exorbitant of a price and that sports had become a money-making scheme, and there were people that rioted against it. Wonder what they'd think about today at $4,500. Fred Arbanis, a tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs, had an accident on the field when on a cross play, he hit another fellow and one of Fred's eyes fell out. Not until then did millions know that he had an artificial eye from an injury 2 years earlier. Now think about this, a tight end with only one eye. The referee for the game, Tommy Bell, stopped the game. Arbanis found his artificial eye on the field, called for the water boy to come rinse it off, and he put it back in. Tommy Bell, by the way, was a Kentucky boy. He was born in the same city I was, in Lexington. He was a referee, and later he became an attorney. Tommy Bell was rather a very short person, and when Arbanis' eye fell out, Bell looked up at him and said, "Fred, I don't believe this. You have only one eye. Your livelihood, your security, your profession, your future, everything depends on your eyesight. You've already lost one of your eyes. What in the world would you do if you lost the other eye?" Arbanis' response is classic. He said, "I guess I'd be a referee like you, Mr. Bell." Second Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9, the Apostle Paul writes, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." The Apostle Paul used words here to describe a Roman gladiator. A Roman gladiator was an armed combatant who entertained audiences, most notably at the Roman Coliseum, in violent confrontation, either with other gladiators or sometimes with wild animals or sometimes even with condemned criminals. And Paul often compared the Christian life to athletic analogies. He uses phrases like fight the good fight, run with patience, wrestle not with flesh and blood. And you know, the Bible has several references to sports. You all know some of these. Did you know the very first baseball game is found in Genesis 1:1 in the big inning? Adam stole first, Eve stole second, Cain struck out Abel, and the giants and the angels were rained out. Do you know where the first tennis match is mentioned in the Bible? It's when Joseph served in Pharaoh's court. First tennis match. They get better. Not much. Motorcycle racing in the Bible, David's triumph was heard throughout the land. Now today I want to talk about playing hurt. It's about staying faithful to the Lord when you go through suffering. How do you stay faithful when you're going through difficulties, when you're suddenly hit a dead end in life? Many of us have been amazed at the recovery of Damar Hamlin after he suffered cardiac arrest in the game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Buffalo Bills last month. It was impressive to hear ESPN's Dan Orlovsky pray for Damar Hamlin on NFL Live. But how do you play hurt? How do you withstand suffering? Well, I want to share a couple of biblical principles this morning that I hope will be inspirational to each one of us, because you've either been hurt, or you might be hurting right now, or you will get hurt at some point in the future. At some point, you do get tackled in life. Here's the first principle, and it is this: suffering is inevitable. Suffering is inevitable. Jesus said in John 16:33, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Jim Brown, a fullback from 1957 to 1965 for the Cleveland Browns, had a very distinct style. Brown was a one-man show combining speed and power. At the end of the play, he was always the last one to get up from the pile-up. He got up slowly, and he always walked slowly back to the huddle. He took countless cuts, bumps, and bruises, and Brown says his style was tactical, and he called it getting up with leisure. He said he did that to conceal the physical punishment that had come his way. He didn't want people to know where he had been hurt. He said he didn't want to get up and hold his back, because then he knew he was going to have a hit from behind on the next play. He said he didn't want to get up and reveal that his right leg was injured, because he then would get tackled from that side. He said, I would often play hurt, but no one knew where I was hurt. Brown was honored at the 2020 College Football Playoff National Championship as the greatest football player of all time. Lou Gehrig, the Iron Horse of baseball, so called for his durability, played when he was hurt. He played 2,130 consecutive games. He was age 21 when he started. He was just shy of 36 when he finished. And in 1938, he underwent an extensive physical, and it was found he'd broken every one of his fingers at least once, some twice, a few of them 3 times. But he suffered 17 different fractures of his hands, none of which were treated, and all of them healed by themselves. The Sewanee University, now known as University of the South in Tennessee, has been recognized as having one of the greatest football teams ever. In 1899, they played 5 other teams in 6 days: Texas, Texas A&M, Tulane, LSU, and Mississippi. But Sewanee had only 14 players. That means that players had to play both offense and defense. But in those 6 days, they scored 113 points in 5 games, and the opposition against them scored absolutely nothing. The team was broken, bruised, and bloodied, but they never missed nor lost a game during that streak. Have you ever been hurt? Remember, you have been, you are, or you will be. It may come physically, it may come emotionally, it may come spiritually, it might come financially, it might come relationally. Job said in Job 14:1, mortals born of woman are a few days and full of trouble. Maybe you've suffered through an illness, or you've been misunderstood, or you've been disappointed, or you had your feelings hurt, or your pride was wounded, or you were offended, or you were insulted, or you felt like you got a raw deal somewhere, or maybe you were in a serious accident. Maybe you developed jealousy against somebody. You felt lonely, or even one of your own children hurt you. 1 Peter 4:12 says, dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. Now, the Bible is not a pessimistic book, but it is a realistic book. In this world, there are going to be some problems you're going to face. It might be the news from a doctor's diagnosis. It might be friction within the office. It might be the thoughtlessness of a mate. It might be an accident. It might be a severe injury. Suffering will be wrapped up in some kind of problem. Joe Namath was plagued by knee injuries even in college. He wore a knee brace during the season prior to his being in Super Bowl III with the New York Jets. Namath underwent 4 knee operations while with the New York Jets. Suffering's inevitable in this world, but let's remember some of our suffering is caused by our own choices at times. There are times when we make poor decisions, and as a result, there is some suffering. Ice hockey player Eric Lamarck played for the French national hockey team in the 1994 Olympics, but he had made some poor decisions, including that he started taking meth and became addicted to it. He decided one day when he was high that he would go snowboarding in the Sierra Nevadas wilderness where he was then living. He was trapped for 8 days due to a blizzard and fought for his survival. And as a result of his poor decisions, he was forced to eat pine nuts, cedar, and even some of his own flesh. Lamarck lost both of his legs due to frostbite after being found. His story is told in the movie Six Below, Miracle on the Mountain, that was released in 2017. His biography tells now of how he has found a better life in Jesus Christ. And I love the title of his biography. It's entitled Crystal Clear. Some suffering can be overcome. Now, it's not always easy to overcome suffering. It can take time. September 4th, 1993, New York Yankees pitcher Jim Abbott pitched a no-hitter against the then Cleveland Indians in Yankee Stadium. Goes down as one of the most inspirational in history. As if a no-hitter in a professional game wasn't impressive enough, Abbott achieved this feat with the physical disadvantage of being born without a right hand. When playing for the New Orleans Saints in 1970, Tom Dempsey made a 63-yard field goal, a record which stood for 4 decades. But Dempsey was born with no toes on his right foot, no fingers on his right hand. He wore a custom flat front kicking shoe that had no toe box. In 1981, the movie Miracle was about the 1980 Winter Olympics, in which the United States hockey team defeated the Soviet Union team on February 22nd, 1980. The Soviet Union was a 4-time defending gold medalist and heavily favored. The U.S. won 4-3. But the Soviet team consisted of professional players with significant experience in international play. By contrast, the U.S. team was composed mostly of amateur players, and only 4 of them had any minor league experience. And the U.S. had the youngest hockey team in the tournament and in the U.S. national team history, but they won by 1 point. Little boy was born a genius, but he had an enormous liability. He had a huge liver-collared welt on the right side of his face all the way down to his mouth, and this horrid birthmark that he had concerned his mother, but it's in the early 1800s. There was absolutely no medical treatments for it, and on his first day of school, naturally, the other children began making fun of him. But he set his mind that he was going to become an educator. And Dr. Charles Eliot eventually became the president of Harvard University, and he held that position for over 40 years. When asked about his birthmark and the often negative remarks, he said his mother told him after his first day of school, "There are some things, Charles, you simply are not going to be able to change in life, and you have to learn to play hurt." Sometimes you have to just learn you're going to have to play hurt. 2 little boys walked into a dentist's office. The one little boy says, "Doctor, we need a tooth pulled really bad. It's really bad. Don't numb it. Don't waste the time to numb it. Just pull it out." The dentist said, "Well, son, tell me which tooth it is." The little boy looked over at his brother and said, "Johnny, show him which tooth you need pulled." Have you ever been hurt? Hurt by adultery? Hurt by loneliness? Hurt by another Christian? Hurt by alcoholism? Hurt by poor financial decisions? I mentioned a few weeks ago that one of our preachers in our brotherhood, Ben Merrill, died at the age of 96. He was well known in the Christian church for leading 2 congregations through very significant growth. Both congregations, when he started, ran a couple hundred people, and when he retired from each of them about 25, 30 years later, they were running around 4,000. But it seemed that everything that Ben touched in ministry just became gold. Everything he touched was successful. Every preacher in our brotherhood wanted to be like Ben Merrill. But what a lot of people did not know is that Ben Merrill had lost 2 sons. One son spent his life in prison due to a drug addiction and died while in prison. And another one of his sons, who was connected with the brother through a couple of mutual friends, was murdered. And Ben Merrill had lost 2 sons as a parent, and yet Ben Merrill got up Sunday after Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, and he was willing to preach, even though every day he hurt. Sometimes you can even hurt when you're trying to do good. Mark Say has the distinction of being the first NFL player to score a 2-point conversion in Super Bowl history. Say played for the San Diego Chargers in Super Bowl 29 in 1995. The San Francisco 49ers won that game, 49-26. But Mark Say was playing hurt. because 7 years earlier in 1988, while attending a Halloween party at his sister's, Say heard shots fired outside the house. He ran outside, shielded his 2-year-old niece with his body. But as a result, he was injured with a .38 caliber bullet that pierced through his pelvis, kidney, and lung, stopping near his heart. That bullet still remains by his heart today. At that time, Say was with the team at Cal State Long Beach, and their head coach, George Allen, helped Say return to the game. School officials had deemed him medically ineligible to avoid legal liability in the event that the bullet by his heart became dislodged during the game. Say sued the university, but before it went to court, the university compromised, and he agreed to sign a waiver absolving the university from liability, and plus he'd wear additional protective equipment. The San Diego Chargers eventually recruited Say, and at the 29th Super Bowl, Say was on the receiving end of the first successful two-point conversion in Super Bowl history. But Mark Say didn't only suffer physically, he suffered emotionally. Afterwards, not from his own injury, but he had other problems. Horrible circumstances attacked his family. In 2003, his older brother Elvin was shot in a motel parking lot in L.A., passed away in a coma. He remained in that coma for 11 months before he died. In 2006, his younger brother James was shot to death in the family's backyard by 2 assailants. You talk about playing hurt. He played hurt physically. He played hurt emotionally. Mark Say is now 55. He's a motivational speaker, and he delivers his personal message of perseverance through adversity to school children, to church youth groups, and to service organizations. Had any bullets fired at your heart? It happens sometimes. It can occur even when you think you're doing the right thing. Former NFL coach and Hall of Famer Tony Dungy was recently criticized by many in professional sports because of his attending and speaking at the March for Life rally in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. Some suggest he should not even be allowed to still be employed with NBC as a sports analyst after he tweeted, "I'm looking forward to joining thousands of others who will be there to support those unborn babies who don't have a voice." And he was attacked because of that tweet. Several in the sports world are highly upset with Dungy because of his conservative religious beliefs. He supports the unborn, he's opposed to LGBTQ, and he's been called homophobic. Keep it up, Dungy. 1 Peter chapter 4, beginning at verse 13 says, "But rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed." You know what that verse says? The more you suffer here, the greater the glory is going to be in eternity for you. If you're insulted, it says, because of the name of Christ, you are blessed for the Spirit of glory and of God. It rests on you. But if you suffer, it should not be as a murderer or a thief or any other kind of criminal or even as a meddler. Look at verse 16. "However, if you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed, but praise God you bear that name. For it is time for judgment to begin with God's household, and if it begins with us, what will the outcome be for those who do not obey the gospel of God?" You know, for a lot of years it seemed that Christianity would get a fair shake, even in a lot of the sporting events. But now that pendulum has swung drastically, and anything that reeks of faith, mentions the name Jesus, quotes the Bible in sports is most often vehemently opposed, and it's become lopsided. The most lopsided score in the history of football was in 1916. Some of you have heard about this game. Georgia Tech played Cumberland College from Tennessee. October 7th, 1916, the final score was Georgia Tech 222, Cumberland College 0. The report was that the Georgia players were large and they were like animals with the Cumberland players who were very small and didn't seem to know what to do. During one play, the Cumberland quarterback fumbled the ball and it rolled toward one of his buddies and he yelled over, "Pick it up." The other player yelled back, "You pick it up, you dropped it." Georgia was being coached by John Heisman, Heisman Trophy. Sometimes in the Christian life, we fumble. Sometimes we get attacked by our opponent, Satan. Sometimes there are just strange circumstances that occur, and we have to remain faithful despite how we feel. In 1974, Jerry York and his wife Judy were ministering with the Conneautville Church of Christ in Pennsylvania. On August 20th of that year, the Yorks took their daughter, ages 9 and 12, to the county fair. They had just finished visiting the horse barn, and they were walking to another part of the fairground. And the main event that particular day, though, was race cars performing various stunts. One of the cars came through a wooden fence and struck Jerry and Judy's two daughters. Michelle was killed instantly, and her younger sister Becky died 2 days later. How do you keep going when you've been hurt like that? How do you keep going when you've lost a spouse, when you've lost a child, when you've lost a parent, when you've lost money, when you've lost a job, when you've lost your reputation and credibility? Jerry York said his favorite Bible verse became this one from Psalm 30, verse 5. For his anger lasts only a moment. His favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. Weeping may stay for a night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. Suffering is inevitable. Here's the second principle. Your eternity is not determined by your suffering, but by your faithfulness. Your eternity is not determined by your suffering, but by your faithfulness. I want you to go over to 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 through 27, the Apostle Paul used quite a bit of athletic analogies here. In fact, this was the very first passage I had to ever preach on in college where I was actually getting a grade for the sermon. And so I actually pulled up that old sermon. I still had the paper copy of this sermon. I mean, it's like 45 years old now. The paper's all yellowed and crinkled and all that. I finally did get a copy scanned in, so I actually have a digital copy of it. But in 1 Corinthians 9, beginning at verse 24, Paul says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Mark Hamilton right over here, he's running in a marathon later today. They came to church early. Good for you. I told him, I said, you'll see me running as a jogger when I see a jogger smiling. Do you not know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that'll not last, but we do it to get a crown that'll last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body, make it my slave, so that after I've preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Now, Paul is referring here to what was called the Isthmian Games of Corinth. The city of Corinth was out on an island-type area, kind of like a peninsula, but it's called an isthmus. And so the Isthmian Games of Corinth were actually the forerunners to our modern-day Olympics. But athletes in the Isthmian Games would spend at least 2 years in strict training to discipline themselves, but the rewards that they could eventually get from running were amazing. If you won your event in the Isthmian Games, you received this whole list of rewards. Here are some of them. You'd get a statue of yourself in your hometown. Here's the best one. You would be exempt from all taxes for the rest of your life. People would run for that. You would also get a crown of laurel leaves to be placed upon your head, and you would get income every year until you died, enough to support your immediate family and your extended family. But when you initially won your event, they would put a crown of laurel leaves upon your head. That's the crown that Paul refers to, the one that will not last. But he says when you're a Christian, there's going to be an eternal crown. There's going to be an eternal reward. Now, sometimes, just like in sports, we get some of our rewards here. You might see your faith affect another person, and you witness that person being baptized into Christ. Or you see your boss make a major decision towards those in the office who are Christian instead of going the other way due to your influence. Or you make an impact in school sports as a Christian, and some of the students start asking about your choices and your faith, and it gives you a wonderful platform to use the name of Christ and to speak about your faith. So some rewards you get here in this world. Los Angeles Lakers star LeBron James broke Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's career scoring record this past Tuesday night in a game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Kareem held that record for more than 38 years at 38,387 points. And when LeBron had the game on Tuesday night, he only needed 36 more points to break the record, and he finished the night with 38 points. When the game was halted to celebrate the record-breaking shot, it was Abdul-Jabbar that held the game ball in the air and handed it over to James, kind of a ceremonial passing of the torch. LeBron James had a mountaintop experience. Now, those will occur occasionally in the Christian life too, but they're not the norm. That's not the norm. The norm is the daily grind of being faithful, the daily grind of honoring Christ with each one of our decisions. We may get some rewards in this life, but that's not the goal. The goal is to be faithful to the Lord even when it is tough, even when we don't feel like running. It is getting up every day and saying, God, I'm going to do my best to do what you want me to do today. Listen to Hebrews 12, beginning at verse 1. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And by the way, the word race there is the word in the first century where they got their word marathon. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. He sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Don't grow weary. Don't lose heart. Even when it hurts to get up and keep playing, you keep going. You keep running. I like that little adage that somebody gave to me 3 or 4 years ago. It says, some people get up in the morning and say, God, here is my problem. But there are others that get up and say, hey, problem, here is my God. And sometimes that's how we need to get up every morning. Now, there are 2 questions that I want to close with today. The first one's directed to a very specific group, parents whose children are involved in sports. And the second one is to all of us. The first one to the parents. Do you coach your kids as much about being in a relationship with Jesus Christ as you do one of their teams? Do you coach your kids as much about being in a relationship with Jesus Christ as you do one of their teams? Tyler McKenzie is a preacher with 3 children. Family lives down in Louisville, Kentucky, where Tyler is the minister at the Northeast Christian Church. He wrote about an experience about baseball in the magazine Christian Standard just a couple of weeks ago, and about his 7-year-old son who loves baseball and who's getting his feet wet in the local Little League. Tyler writes about how intentional, especially the fathers are, about teaching their boys about baseball. He writes, you've invested thousands of dollars in travel ball, private lessons, and advanced equipment. You've invested hundreds of hours playing catch in the yard, going to practices, and attending summer camps. You have bought your kids bed sheets and pajamas emblazoned with balls, gloves, and bats. They are 7, but we are already all in on their journey to Cooperstown. Don't tell me you don't know how to be intentional. Instead, imagine what we might do if we invested all of that into our kids' spiritual formation. And then in this article, Tyler shifts his thoughts to intentional parenting for our kids spiritually. He writes, I've been a bit cheeky so far, but there's nothing wrong with baseball. It is a great teacher of life. I just wonder when we'll realize there's almost a 0% chance our kids will go on to play Division I baseball in college, and much less get a cup of coffee in the majors. But there is a 100% chance they will stand before God one day. Most of us keep our kids busy with an array of activities unrelated to church. The parents in my city, though, want to be intentional. I've seen it. I'm not asking anyone to stop baseball. The pitch of this article, don't you like that, the pitch of this article, is to bring that same intentionality to your kids' faith. Church, twice a month, whenever travel ball or lake trips don't conflict, will not be enough. A 15-minute Bible lesson and a craft in kids' church will not be enough. Nothing less than parental responsibility will do. Parents, are you as intentional about your kids' spiritual life as you are their sports life. And here's the second question, and it's to all of us. Are you willing to keep running the race in the Christian life even when you get hurt? Are you willing to keep running the race in the Christian life even when you get hurt? Maybe you're here today and you feel like spiritually you have fumbled, and that's okay. Pick up the ball, start running again. Maybe you get tripped up in a habit. There seems to be no way out. You seek some help. You get a life coach. You get somebody that can pull you out of that. Don't let pride be your downfall. And don't get mad at yourself. Don't get mad at other Christians who feel that may have hurt you. Because you as yourself, you are not the opposition, and they are not the opposition. Satan is the opposition. You develop the resilient attitude the Apostle Paul had. Even if you feel hard-pressed and crushed and perplexed and persecuted and abandoned and struck down, you get back up. Paul didn't say you get disqualified if you don't win against somebody else spiritually. That's not what comes out in 1 Corinthians 9, verses 24 through 27. Paul says you get disqualified for the eternal prize if you quit. So don't quit. Whatever your situation of hurt might be, take that disappointment, make it an opportunity. Take that interruption, make it an opportunity. Take that frustration and make it a motivation to get back up. In 1852, a lot of California vineyards were going bankrupt because of a drought. The grapes just shriveled up on the vines. One vineyard owner picked them anyway and took them to market and introduced them as Peruvian delicacies. We've been eating raisins ever since. Thomas Edison started out selling newspapers on a Western railroad. He was fired from his job because he spilled acid in the baggage car and set it on fire. The accident turned him to scientific research, one of the greatest scientists who ever lived. NBA star Michael Jordan was placed on the junior varsity team during high school to develop his skills better because the coaches thought he had better potential, but it just hadn't developed yet. He had to take a setback to become something better. Some people watch the Super Bowl for more than just the game. A lot of people watch the Super Bowl tonight because they want to see the ads. They want to see these ads where this ridiculous amount of money is spent on them. This year, there will be an ad campaign with the title, He Gets Us. It's going to briefly show the full humanity of Jesus. The ads are going to remind viewers of Jesus' humanity and his ability to understand the struggles that we all experience in life. The ad campaign is an initiative of the Signatory, a Christian foundation that's based in Overland Park, Kansas. The foundation was given over $100 million for these ads tonight. A large part of that donation was provided by David Green, founder of Hobby Lobby. But we see a lot of money spent promoting bad habits during the Super Bowl. So hopefully there'll be some good results with ads about Jesus Christ. Now, even some of those ads have created some controversy. But the best advertisement isn't going to be what people see about Jesus on a screen tonight. The best advertisement for Jesus is you and me, especially when we're willing to play hurt and then others see our testimony. They see our faith. You keep playing. You keep running. You make it to the goal line. You get that final basket. You make a grand slam. And don't you dare give up until you go up. You may start late in the race, but you cannot and you must not quit early. Don't give up until you go up. Let's pray. Father, this morning, we come to you being reminded that Jesus was willing to endure the cross of Calvary for us. May we never forget his willingness and his example. And so, God, as we come this morning, we'll be reminded again of the price that was paid in his discipline to go to the cross. And we thank you for his willingness to be for us what we some days cannot be for ourselves. And may we not give up. May we not quit. In Jesus' name, amen.